Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the Global Voices podcast. I'm your amazing host, Arshad. I know you've been missing me dearly, but I'm back now. And as you can see, I have a microphone, so you can hear me a lot more clearly this time, because I know you all love my voices. But enough about me. We're back with a new episode, and there's a new topic that we're very interested in talking about. And to talk about that topic, we've brought two very amazing guests with us today. So I'd like to just pass it over to these two quickly so they can quickly introduce themselves, and then we'll dive right into it.
Okay. Hello, everyone. So my name is Miguel. I'm a youth board member in the associate and the Learning for Wellbeing Foundation, and I'm here today to talk about a topic that is a great interest to me, and I'm
Miguel.
really looking forward for this discussion.
And hi everyone, I'm Andri. I'm also, like Miguel, a board member of the Learning for Wellbeing Foundation, and very much looking forward to today's conversation.
Awesome. Well, it's lovely to meet both of you guys. And yeah, I think I'm also excited for today's conversation. It's actually a topic that I'm quite interested in myself, because I feel like it's something I've experienced over time, through just the different work that I've been involved with. But yeah, let's stop alluding to it and start jumping into the conversation itself. You guys know what we're talking about, but the audience at home may not. So today we're actually going to be talking about something called youth washing. And it's a very important topic, I feel, because it's something that a lot of people may face but not actually recognize. Um, the world has been moving in a good direction, I feel, in terms of working with young people and collaborating with them. But it's not perfect, let's say. There's still times when young people are present, but they're not heard. And that's basically that's what youth washing is in a sense. It's when young people are used in a sort of more performative way, but in reality, the young people's voice, where the young people are present and involved in conversations, just so to the general public, it looks very appealing. It's like, oh my god, the young people involved here, let's listen, and the substance of what they're actually saying isn't heard. And it's an issue that a lot of people have had to face through different things. I'm sure both of you may have faced youth washing in your own ways, which we'll get into. And it's just something that we need to talk about and we need to address because it's just not right, I feel.
I think I've been quite lucky to not have been um, actively engaged in a situation that could be defined as youth washing, but it's definitely something that I have over the past few years, whether that's at attending conferences and seeing other foundations, or just through the work I've done with the Learning for Wellbeing Foundation over the years. You do get to see how certain other foundations work, and there are definitely, I think, elements that can be described as youth washing. The way I understand it is basically when you have a foundation effectively using the fact that they involve youth primarily and predominantly as a selling point, where young people's participation is very, very narrowly defined and, not participatory in any real meaning of the word. Um, I think a good example was last year with the Learning for Wellbeing Foundation. Aksa Ali and Aksa is another board member of the foundation, attended COP26. And there were definitely, I think, elements of the running of the conference that could be described as youth washing, particularly when we think about all the media attention given to youth participation in the conference. And if we contrast that to the actual opportunities of young people, that young people were given to engage with negotiators, um, I think certain elements of the running of of COP could definitely be described as youth washing. And that's, I'm sure there are many, many other examples that come to mind, but I think more often than not, at least in my experience, you will notice pieces of and elements of youth washing here and there, and sometimes it's quite difficult to register until you take the time to reflect. So I think your question caught me a bit out of guard in terms of thinking of examples, but I think COP26 was probably the most kind of blatant example of youth washing that I can think of recently. But what about you, Miguel? Have you had any such experiences?
So, in it's very weird because I don't think I've ever experienced it in a true, like, a a way that it could really feel it strongly. But after the fact, you always think about what happened. And you're like, wait, this was weird. So it's not always like frontal. It can be hidden. And when you think about the situation you're in and how things played out, you think you. I mean, I've definitely experienced youth washing in different contexts. Um, but when it's interesting. A few years ago, it was, I think, COP26. The theme was youth empowerment, and so it was interesting because a lot of youth activists, yes, young activists for climate were called in to do a session before COP26 to write a document that would be used during the conference. And I read articles about it, and it was obvious that obviously nothing was done upon this document. It was crazy. And when period 2021, etc., was special for me because there was the climate marches. We all remember it. It was all over the world, and I participated. But obviously, when I tried with some friends, we tried at school to talk about it. I mean, it was just we. I mean, we were asked to talk about it, but nothing was acted upon this discussion, and it happened and happened. And I think it happens more often than we think. It's in a lot of our areas of life. It can be at school because obviously it's for a climate where there's a lot of young people, but it's weird. It's in sectors where youth should have a voice because it's what matters to them: it's education, climate now, or things like that. Sport, I think, also sports association is definitely a big. I've seen it a lot, where I mean, basically, you have a lot of young people in these associations, and nobody has a voice. So, on when they do, it's uh, it's never acted upon, and I think it's something that should absolutely change. So I've seen it a lot, and I think a lot of people have seen it. If you haven't experienced it, you've definitely been a spectator of it.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, I should preface this with saying that from the people we've gotten the chance to speak to, not everyone flagged up youth washing as an issue. So some people did feel like they were able to actively participate and talk with their local delegations, but I think this was really kind of the exception more than the rule. Um, we were lucky also with Global Voices to have a session with quite a few people who attended um, the youth conference in Milan before COP26, and what they shared was quite a bit of disillusionment. I think it was definitely excitement at the start to get the opportunity to collaborate with many young people, very passionate climate activists around the world, to deliver a piece of work that they were really proud of and that they felt could actually make an impact in COP26 and the decisions that were made there. But when there was effectively, from what we heard, zero follow up on that document and very little commitment to uh, promote the work that the young people did in Milan in the actual COP26 negotiations, I think, yeah, there was definitely quite a lot of disappointment there. And I guess it makes sense, you work very hard to do something, you're very proud of it, and you think it's gonna, you've been given the opportunity to raise your voice. That's what you're there to do based on what you're told. And then ultimately you see that you've spoken, but no one is listening. It's a bit difficult, and I feel like anger, like I said, again, disillusionment is the main feeling, because I feel like when you're working really hard towards something and try to make things more intergenerational or participatory, it can be quite difficult when you feel like um, I guess, when you feel that your voice is taken away effectively in those conversations, and it does make it more challenging to carry on with the work you're doing, given all the challenges you're facing on a regular basis. And I think that was like the main sentiment shared from those conversations at COP26. Definitely very mixed experiences, and I think there were delegations who definitely got it right and whose young people felt represented and were given the opportunity. And some of them were incredibly grateful to be given the opportunity to participate. But on the flip side of that, there were many people who were quite disillusioned and disappointed that all the work and effort they put into producing the work in the Young Food Conference preceding COP26 did not have the impact they were wishing for. But I think upon reflection, it's a really great example of the impact that meaningful youth participation can have on some people, and conversely, the impact of youth washing. On the one hand, the people that felt hurt had like a whole new passion to continue fighting for the causes they were passionate about. In this case, for climate activism, and they left the conference feeling empowered and willing to and ready to do more for this cause. But on the flip side, the people that did not feel sufficiently heard, and the people who could accuse their delegations and the conference of engaging in youth washing, left with a much more negative view of youth participation, um, and a bit of a disappointment, which I think is quite difficult to manage, especially at the young age.
Yeah, I think I think I like the way that you put that. I think it is true that in reality, youth washing does exist, but it's not like everyone experiences it the same way, and it may not be the case that everyone actually experiences it, because I feel like there's some individuals out there in terms of the adults or people in charge of these events who do actually actively look at young people and hear them out and engage with them wholly and fully. And so in those cases, those young people may feel very respected, very acknowledged, and very empowered to be able to move forward with whatever they're passionate about, be that the climate activism during COP or any other event. But I think it's that therein lies the issue, where there's some adults which are on board, but quite a few it seems that aren't. And what I what I'm curious to hear from you guys maybe is what you think the impacts are on young people based on those adults who maybe aren't as involved or aren't as engaged and actively listening to young people.
So I'd like to say, I mean, in subjects like climate, which obviously affect people, young people more because it concerns them, and also because it affects them directly for the future. Young people should be involved all the time, and people, I mean, adults. We're gonna talk about adults and young people. Adults that work in these subjects. It's it's weird that you are interested in climate, for example, but do not care about people that it affects, because obviously climate is a theme of the future. And so when you want to include youth, I mean, if you want to include youth, you should listen to them because, I mean, we all agree on this. But what I think the impact is if there's no real listening, if there's youth washing, I think it may uh, cause people to, I mean, young people to wanna to participate less in the future, to be less involved in the discussions because they feel like it doesn't matter. I mean, I talk, I don't talk, doesn't change anything. Why even bother, right? So it's very sad because I do not think it's a majority of adults that think like that, but the ones that do create a problem for the future. You also see it in politics with young people wanting less and less to vote or to be involved in politics because, I mean, it's like it doesn't. It's like it's its own thing, and you cannot change it. Right? There's no way to your vote. It's like voting. Voting doesn't matter because one less vote doesn't change anything. And so youth participation is the same thing. You feel like it doesn't matter if I'm here or not. And this is obviously a big problem because we need young people to want to participate, to want to act more, and to not be frustrated because they don't matter in the discussion.
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely agree with you, Miguel, there. I think, to be honest, I think it can go two ways. I think some people can be disappointed and decide to retreat, is what Miguel was saying, and not participate anymore. I think you can have people that are kind of disappointed and choose to react to it. And I feel like that's
Mhm.
where you can have positive action resulting from this. People who are saying, hold
Yeah.
up, this is not the way this is meant to be or the way it can be. But I think the real risk here is because I feel like those of us who have been lucky enough to work with the Learning for Wellbeing Foundation have really seen what youth participation can be like and what we really mean when we're talking about working with young people and children, not just for them. So I feel like for us it is much easier to pick up youth washing and call it out. I think a big concern is young people and children who have seen this their whole life and do not know an alternative. So if you don't know that this is not the way things are meant to be, or that this is not the way things should be, rather, it's very easy to normalize it and say that this is just the way things are. And like Miguel said, I feel like the impact of that is that you stop engaging because you think that that's all there is that you can do. Um, and I think it is interesting to see how, if you grow with this opinion of participation, how you later, pass it down to your children or other young people and children around you. But yeah, I think definitely that would agree with Miguel there.
Yeah. No, I think both of you've laid out a very interesting point in terms of like the development of young people and experiencing this throughout their life. Because I guess when you mentioned, for example, when you mentioned learning for being, if we look at it from a learning for being perspective in terms of engaging whole, be quite
Mm.
shameful at times. I feel, or with your whole self. There's a lot of aspects that can be affected by things like youth washing, like mentally. If you feel like you've been youth washed and you've been essentially used just for your youthfulness rather than your passions and what you actually want to say.
Yeah,
Um,
I mean, I think you're spot on there, Arshad. I think there are different types of youth washing, right? From a conversation alone, there can be that sort of inviting people to participate but not giving them the forum to actually voice their thoughts. But I think you also touched on a different type of youth washing, which is like kind of like just labeling someone as a young person but nothing more. So just saying, Arshad has the same experiences as Andri because they're both young people, for example, and not really being that interested in your backgrounds, your interests, your talents, your aspirations. um, I guess, both are very, very harmful, but it was interesting that you mentioned that because I feel it definitely has, I think, links with imposter syndrome. And I can see why you're making that connection because I feel like if you're in a space when you don't feel like you can be your true self to voice your opinion unconditionally, openly, but also just be interested in the things you're interested without having to fake it, it must be very, very difficult on the individual to actually speak up because you constantly have this fear of, oh, what if I'm not saying the thing they're expecting me to say? And what repercussions will that have if I speak too openly and someone doesn't like it? So I think it definitely fuels quite a lot of insecurity. And in a way, a feeling of that your opinion only truly matters once you're an adult. I mean, one of the things that we always say here at the Learning for Wellbeing Foundation is that you shouldn't say that children are the future; they're the present because they're here right now, and you shouldn't just say that they matter once they turn 18. Um, and I think youth washing does have this effect of making people feel like you don't matter until you are an adult legally, um, and that I'm sure is very disempowering, but also fuels this sense of, am I good enough? Am I not worthy to have, can I not add that value just because of my age? And I think that can be extremely harmful. Yes, absolutely.
Absolutely. I think I like what you said about, I mean, looking at the individual. Besides his age, there's talent, there's background, there's everything. And I also think it's because our society values a lot life experience. Just being here is enough to get credit, right? I've been here 40 years. Like, I've lived this. And maybe what you did before doesn't even matter for what we're talking about, but it's fine. You're wrong. And so life experience takes a great place in our society, but I feel like youth can bring something else. A fresh view on things is sometimes undervalued. I think it's a great thing. It, it maybe, I mean, there's young people sometimes have a view very different from the normal societal view because they haven't been here for so long. That's an advantage of not having so much life experience. And so, I mean, you see it in very young kids who question things that you do not even think about questioning. You're like, wait, it's true. That for me, that's normal. But this kid is wondering why. You know, you often see, I mean, in the past, you had children very young when questioning about racism. I mean, now today's society has evolved, but a few decades ago, I mean, you had very little children wondering, I mean, questioning why is it like this, and adults being like, it is how it is. I mean, and couldn't explain it because you're formatted by your life experience. And so I think we need to value more this fresh and un, unfiltered
Mhm.
ideas of youth, the young people in general.
For those at home who may not know, Miguel has recently joined Wellbeing Foundation as its newest board member because in the foundation we wanted to adopt this model of working collaboratively with young people, and we're literally trying to not youth wash and actively engage with young people and ensure their voices are heard. And so within the board itself, we try to include young people. And Miguel, seeing as you have just joined that board, I was wondering for you maybe coming into it, did you have any of these concerns of maybe your voice not actually being heard, people like that is more just for show that you're joining the board?
Um, I obviously thought a little bit about it, but I mean, for me too, I don't have the experience yet. Like about, I'm new to the field. I'm gonna say, uh, so I was kind of okay of being okay of just being a spectator, mostly for the first board meeting. So now in the future, I want to be way more engaged, of course. And so I ask questions around even after meeting. I asked things, sent emails because, of course, I want to get up to speed. But so in the beginning, I wasn't too scared of it. I knew that the foundation has had already that model for a few, I mean, a few times. No, that doesn't mean anything. The model was there for quite a long time, and so I mean, I was just replacing someone. It wasn't like it had just been created, right? But I hope that in the future I can be way more engaged, and that there's nothing that's gonna be stopping me from it. Yeah.
No, and I think that's great to hear the fact that you're so optimistic about this situation and joining the board and getting more engaged. And I think it says quite a lot the fact that you're able to feel comfortable enough to engage like that and you're not worried about the potentials of youth washing and such, which I think just goes to show that it is possible to engage with young people in like on an organizational level, not just actively in projects and such, but within organizations and foundations themselves. And so I think it's quite important to point that out because unfortunately there still is this sort of lack of awareness, maybe it is, as to why people can't engage with young people properly or why adults may not be able to engage with young people properly. It's important to acknowledge the fact that there are good places where or there's individuals who are willing to engage with young people effectively and competently, and it's a safe space to engage in that dialogue. But then why is it that there's still cases where people do youth wash and may not engage with young people properly? And I wanted to hear your thoughts on what you guys think is the reason for that. Like, why is youth washing a thing?
I mean, I'd say, of course, reasons can vary, and I don't think if we even stayed here for the next week doing this podcast, we'd be able to come up with all the different reasons for causes for it. But the first one that comes to mind is definitely, um, I guess, ignorance about, um, well, ignorance in two levels. Ignorance in terms of um, that, in terms of the existence of youth washing as an issue, and the fact that they're actually doing it, but also ignorance in terms of how you can engage young people and children in a better participatory um, way. So, on the second point, so I think for better, I think still it's definitely not mainstream to learn about participatory approaches, and it's still not. I think many foundations will still not have received training on how to engage with young people and children in an ideal participatory way. So I think that is definitely a barrier in terms of working with young people in the way that is not contributing to youth washing. So a sort of we don't know how to make it better kind of approach. And I think on the other side, I'm sure there are people who are quite unaware of the issue or unaware that they are that they're committing youth washing. And if you don't know that you're doing something, it's very difficult to remedy it. I'd say those are the two things I'd attribute it towards. What about you, Miguel? Do you think? What do you think?
I mean, you've been very clear already, but to add to that, I would say also that there's a lack of respect for the knowledge of youth. I truly believe it. I think,
Mm.
I mean, we've talked about it before, but young people have something to add to the table. I mean, it makes sense, mostly on topics that directly influence them. I think they always should have a voice. And so I think there's this misunderstanding. There's maybe this lack of, not, I like the word lack of respect for the knowledge of young people. There's, I mean, I add that to everything you said, but because I think you truly nailed it. Yeah.
No, but I think that's a really good point. Like, I guess what you're touching upon, which I think is very important to add to the conversation, is that maybe they don't see the point of going the extra mile to actively engage with young people, because if you don't respect the young voice, as you just mentioned, you don't see the benefit of, training your staff on methods of participation, on leaving the space and attributing the resources to get young people and children to actively engaged. So I think that you really kind of hit the nail on the head there with that, because I think it's definitely something that's contributing to the issue. Definitely.
Absolutely. Like, for example, in the political world, you see roles that have a minimum age to be able to perform. Like, I don't know. I mean, I'm quite happy that, for example, prime minister role needs a certain minimum age. I think this is the kind of role you need some life experience, right? But other than that, I think it shows that it's embedded in our society that years are knowledge, and that years mean capacity of being able to achieve things, really.
It may just be the case again, I think what we alluded to before, where there's some sort of ignorance in the sense of adults or whoever may not view young people as having had that experience to make a valid contribution to whatever discussion there is. I don't know if you guys have any thoughts on that, or if you've experienced being a part of any advisory groups in the past or something like that.
Okay, I'd say my experiences were mostly positive. I mean, when I was 16, I was in the Cyprus Students' Parliament, and that group was run by some really, really passionate individuals who were really taught us the foundations of the importance of, the right to participation, how it is a right, how it's not just something that people can give to you if and with whatever conditions they wish to, if they even do want to give you the ability to participate. Um, so yeah, we're taught from the start that it's a right to participate, and we're given the space to work. So I think I was quite lucky in my experiences. But I think what came to mind based on the story you were showing, Arshad, and I can't pinpoint it to a specific example, but I think something that I've encountered quite a bit when you have sort of child advisory boards or youth advisory boards or whatever is this mindset that because you set up the group, you are already so far ahead of the game, and so you don't need to constantly work on improving it. So a sense of, oh well, we made this group, look at us, we're so innovative and forward thinking, and we set up this child advisory group, that should be enough for them. Almost like you should be grateful for what you're given instead of demanding more participatory rights or better, a more inclusive environment. So I think what I have seen, and again, I can't pinpoint it to a specific scenario, but I've seen quite a few cases where there's a feeling of just being passive and a bit complacent. So a sense of we did this, that should be enough because it's already better than what other foundations have, without really taking the time to look at, like what you were saying, the actual work, the actual reality of those children and young people involved, and how we can make those better.
It's just what you said about these children consulting, I mean, advisory groups, made me think about the COP26. Really, it sounds like totally similar. Like, we're gonna let you speak between yourselves, you make us a report, and then maybe we'll read it. And it's just, it stays that, right? It doesn't necessarily mean action.
Mm.
It
And
was just
actually, I have thought an example that of youth watching that will happen to me based on what Miguel was saying. So I'm not gonna, yeah, ooh, spill the tea. Yeah, not gonna say specifics, but I was in a project. I was a delegate in a project, and as a young delegate, so it was myself as the young delegate, and then the regular delegates attending a conference, and we had our little like youth. Don't give me that look. And we would have our regular
Mm,
activities as part of the young delegation cohort, and then we would have free time to engage with the remaining members of the delegation. And you could definitely see some countries who are really proactive and engaging with the young people and getting them involved in policy events and kind of really making sure
mm,
they have the forums to raise their voice. And I must say, I was one of the unlucky people in that experience where the only interactions I had with my delegation were over dinner on one day and nothing more. So I did
mm.
spend the week sneaking into events with the other youth delegates, keep this between us. Um, but see, that's the thing though. Like when you asked me at the start, I couldn't even recall this event. And then the more we unpack it, the more you start reflecting and say, oh, wow, well, this happened to me. So I'm sure that many of our listeners will might start the podcast thinking to themselves, this never happened to me. And then by the end, they might be surprised to think, you know what, this did happen. And I think it's interesting how when you reflect, things kind of come to the surface, even though as they happen to you, you might not even realize why it's wrong.
Wasn't. And so, like you said, on personal reflection, you may look back and think, oh, I've never experienced youth washing. And then you reflect a bit more and unpacking is like, actually, yes, I have. But there may be cases just the right amount where people do the opposite, where they look back and they're like, actually, no, I felt like I was engaged. Adults need to follow and adults need to enforce, like Goldilocks, like just the right amount.
I mean, I guess it's about managing expectations, right? I think the situations will vary, and of course, in different scenarios, the appropriate level of engagement, while might vary depending on the activity, depending on the feelings of the group and how much they want to engage, and the level at which that they want to have that engagement. But I think, I mean, you can't really know unless you kind of have that conversation. Um, and I guess it's about transparency. I feel like because the example you were pointing towards is kind of a situation where you reflect back and say, okay, that was actually exactly as much participation and engagement as I wanted. I wouldn't have liked something more. And I'm sure that that does happen, but it's so if I were to put myself in that situation where I look back and say, that was enough, I think the main element that I would reflect on would be like kind of transparency. This is how much I thought I was going to participate, and this is how much I ended up participating, or this is how much after conversation and discussion we agreed that we should participate. I feel like it's quite, not every type of participation will be full participation. I mean, I don't even know what full participation would mean in every context, but I guess the one kind of recurring feature that I would imagine exists in all cases where young people feel like they participated as much as they should have wanted to would be defined by that kind of transparency and open communication with the adults so that they feel on board with that decision and that they understand the decision. So if you're going to say that you participate up to this level for safety reasons, well, you should still communicate that. So there's kind of, I guess, it's respect, right? And I keep getting back to that, and I definitely agree when Miguel raised the point about respect. But if you have if you think about any two people, then if you make a decision, you will communicate with them, you will discuss it with them. So why should it be any different when young people and children are involved? But what do you think, Miguel?
I absolutely agree. I mean, I don't know what to add to this. Really, we can move forward.
Tough one, really tough one, Arshad. You really threw us off the ball.
I think hearing what you had to say, both of you, we reflect a lot on just where my mind was going with all of this. And I found it very valuable how we manage our expectations. When you said it's all about the transparency and the communication, because ultimately it is, because if you go into it as a young person expecting to be heard, etc., and then, for example, in the COP26 event, they don't look at it or they don't look at your thoughts and what you've compiled and they disregard it. And in that sense, it is a case of, oh, so my participation was undervalued and not acknowledged. And that's quite disheartening. And so, like I mentioned, I wanted to pose this question to you guys in terms of the future and what we can do moving forwards. How could we overcome things like youth washing? You mentioned transparency and communication. That's one way. I'm wondering if there's another.
I think a way to really fight youth washing is by doing the opposite, I mean, showing that youth participation works, right? Leading by examples, I think, is a great way. And so we should fight so that more and more foundations, associations, or even, I don't know, or other groups of people uh, start leading by example, implementing youth participation and intergenerational um, partnership, collaboration to show that is this possible. Because I mean, I think a lot of what we said was that basically it youth washing exists because there's a lack of knowledge and understanding of youth participation, right? So I think that could be a good way to start solving the problem.
Yeah, very, very well said, Miguel. No, I think you captured really the main thing here. Um, I don't think I have that much to add on top of that. I mean, just listen. I guess that's the main thing. Listen to what the young people, the children have to say, and also listen to what they expect from you if they are to engage in this conversation, this intergenerational dialogue. And I feel like requirements and expectations, like we said before, will be different in every context. But it's always best to listen and ask instead of assuming. Um, and yeah, I think the young people in any given context will tell you what they would like to see. So then it's up to you to combat this unawareness by having those conversations and then acting on them.
Andrew, like you mentioned, it is a case of listening to one another and asking the questions. So inquiring when you can to find out what the other party's needs are, or what their wants are. Because it could be a case where, say, people just lack the understanding, or just, like we mentioned before, they're unaware of the potential that you have to give. Because it may be the case that they think, oh, you're a young person, you don't have that many experiences in life, what can you offer? When in reality, there's so much that you can offer and so much you have to give. And so, yeah, it might just be a case of practicing what you preach, and demonstrating your capabilities and showcasing the fact that there is a lot that I have to offer here, and there's a lot that I'm passionate about, that I want to engage in, and a lot of work that we want to do together. But it is still ultimately a thing of collaboration, because, like we mentioned at the start, there's many cases where youth washing prevents that collaboration. Even looking back at the work that I've taken part in and done myself, I definitely see moments where I was youth washed. Partly because I was a young person at the time. I'm still young, but at the time I was younger. And partly for other things like diversity. I feel like it was like, I'm a South Asian male. It's like, oh, diversity quota, check. Young person quota, check. But I joke. It started like that, but I feel like the engagement and the opportunities I was given allowed me to sort of demonstrate that I had a lot more on offer and a lot more to give to help benefit the cause of the activity I was taking part in at the time. And so, yeah, it's like you said, Miguel, giving people those opportunities to excel in their, or just not excel, but demonstrate what they have to give,
Mhm.
can go a long way, and just truly show the fact that youth washing shouldn't be a thing, because you don't need youth to make you look good.
Absolutely. I liked what you said about that you shown you, I mean, basically you proved yourself, right? And you showed the world that you're also, there's a reason why you're here and why you need to stay. And that's also a good message, because I mean, we've talked about a lot about what could
It is.
organizations do and basically adults do, but there's also young people. I mean, they need to fight for it, right? We need to basically show adults and, and persevere. I don't know if that's a word in English, but still, right then, that's good. Persevere and show our worth. Continue to excel when we participate, because that's another way, right? I mean, it's not going to be a one way thing where adults need to make youth participation better. Young people too need to absolutely go out of the way, basically, to show what they're capable of. And that will also help a lot.
Absolutely, couldn't have said it better. But yes, for me, any last words? When you were sharing your experience, Arshad, just now, and saying how you were youth push at the start, and then you kind of showed your worth, and you were given all these opportunities. I guess all good for you, bravo. Um, what I would like to see, I think,
Mm,
would be a situation where young people and children don't need to prove their worth to be given access
Mhm.
to proper participation, but rather that that is given open-handedly to them, regardless of ability, because that's a very subjective term. But a situation
mm,
where children and young people are given the opportunity to participate in a proper, inclusive way from the start, from the get-go, and that their contribution is valued for whatever it is, not just because an adult has deemed it to be good or not based on their own standards. I think
mhm.
that's the way to go for me. And thanks for hosting this session. It was a really nice conversation.
Thank you very much. Yeah, absolutely.
What we were saying towards the beginning, in terms of just giving the respect to young people, to know that they are more than capable. They have so much potential to do. We are in a world where young people don't need to prove themselves, but instead they can just wholeheartedly engage in competent partnerships with adults or whoever else they may want to work together with to make a change in the world. And yeah, hopefully one day we can all just act together. But yeah, thank you guys so much for joining us today. Unfortunately, we have run out of time, but it was amazing having the chance to speak with both of you And I'm sure like people at home watching this or listening into this would have definitely enjoyed your perspectives. Thank you all once again. Thank you so much for joining, and take care.